Hey folks, this is Tolly and welcome to some more game dev. Here again Sunday, going to be taking a look at some bugs primarily is the main thing we're looking at. Last week we were doing some NPC event stuff, if I remember correctly. We had built a bit of a system. In fact, let's go take a look at that real quick. Just to recap where we were. We had built a system in order to allow us to see the enemy boar attack an NPC in kind of like a cutscene like experience. So when we walk up here and we trigger this cutscene, we will see the placeholder adventurer and the boar spawn. And with the system we built last week, we now can have events that trigger without us actually being in combat. So basically we have set it up so every 5 steps we take, this boar will perform an action, and it's actually kind of a fake action. We called that playful attack, and it's essentially hard-coded to just display the parry after doing the attack animation. And so eventually we will get a NPC in here that will actually be doing like a parry kind of reaction so that this feels more correct. But for the time being, at least, we have this setup where we don't have to actually initiate combat to try and make this type of experience feel more real, where this adventurer is kind of backed into the corner of this river. Instead, we just let this happen outside of combat, and that's working okay. It does look like there is some animation popping occasionally, or maybe that was just because I was tapping the move key. Nope, there was definitely an animation pop, so there's still something that's a little broken there, but overall pretty fine. Now, today, I want to take a look at some bugs. There is some cleanup work to be done on that NPC event system as well, but I more so want to focus on the bug work. Now, the reason I want to look at some bugs is that Drixie and I had gone through the build yesterday and found a number of small issues. Nothing super upsetting or like, oh my goodness, this is going to take hours, but some small stuff. Things that I think should be relatively easy to fix, like if you attack while the death sequence is happening, it breaks and you will not actually end up going back to the Goddess Realm and getting the proper game over. The game will just be permanently frozen. We also saw that the timer at some point in the current save also broke, so that it was no longer ticking up. It was just stuck at this time and never changing, but eventually the run would end out of running out of time. It just wasn't immediately clear. So that's a little weird. A number of these smaller issues. Now, we haven't looked at kind of bugs in a while because we've kind of been down a rabbit hole of like building new features and trying to solve some pretty major problems with the combat system. But I think it's a good time to look at some of this stuff because I also have an announcement burying the lead a little bit into this video, but we are going to be doing another 4 weeks of game dev, similar to how we did last year around the same time, a little bit later than last year, but similar. We're going to be doing I've gotten 4 weeks off from work in which I'm going to be focusing on infinite retries to defeat the Demon Lord. This project will be my primary focus for 4 weeks straight. No context switching with work, no only working on it on Sundays and then waiting until the following Sunday to do any more progress. It will be probably a normal amount of work time, so I'm going to say 4 to 5 days a week. We're going to be doing stuff. I've started penciling some of that in here, similar to how we did last year. We had kind of done, 4 to 5 streams each week and gotten a lot of work done. I've started another kind of chunk of what do we want to try and accomplish and started penciling in some stream times, but they are very much work in progress, so I don't want to commit to anything yet. But ideally sometime tomorrow I will start the very first stream of this 4-week journey where I think we're once again going to be trying to get to another demo or at least a good chunk of work done. Now, that all being said, for today we're not going to worry about all that. We're just going to focus on cleaning up some bugs and trying to make the game a little bit more stable before we go into, ideally, a fair amount of content creation over the next few weeks. At least that's the plan. So here we've got this enemy And we're loading up this save we have from yesterday, in which we had played through a good chunk of the game. We were pretty far in, and we have a couple of these bugs still active. The timer has not been moving, and I believe when we die here, I have a good setup to test this moment where we are trying to perform an action while the death sequence was happening, and this is a big problem. We need to make it so that you cannot perform any actions while the sequence is being performed. So that all being said, I think the first thing I'd like to dive into today and look at is, why is the timer not moving? Because that should hopefully be something easy to debug and start getting an understanding of. So let's dive in and load up the save file again. And we start with 56 on the clock, and we are not seeing this move at all. We're going to put a breakpoint in, and we're going to look for the backend manager. Dungeon manager? Which one am I looking for? I think it is the clock one. Let's find a reference to this. State manager, that's the one we care about. So if we look in here, this should be used in some sort of function for resetting the clock, but also for advancing time. So I want to see what's happening. Are we getting to this clock advancement? And if so, why are we not seeing the UI update? So let's start following through. So we are hitting this function, and ideally this flag should be correct. And it was. We did get into advanced time. We're going to post a notification about that time advancement. I don't think anything's listening for that. Oh, there's a couple of things. Okay. Some flags are listening to how much time has passed. That all seems fine. We also have the combat state machine is also listening and doing some amount of work. This is fine. Yeah, that is all okay too, and it looks like that is all the notifications that are listening to the advancement of time. We should be reducing the time, and we can see the time is actually at 23 right now, not at the labeled 56. Okay. Oh, interesting. This looks like what should be updating the time, but it thinks that we are currently tallying. Alright, I'm going to say that's probably where the bug is. Yeah, tallying is true, which means we're not going to start a coroutine to change the time parameter. Now, is that because the tallying is part of the clock state? Interesting. This clock state gets saved and... Oh, that's an interesting bug. Yeah, this gets saved out into our save system. And so what I'm guessing has happened is we had exited out of a room as the timer was changing at some point, and that got saved out as tallying as true. And then when we exited the game and reloaded it, because tallying was true, it is not getting into these tally update time or update experience functions, and therefore can never see tallying set back to false. Very interesting. So how do I fix that? Well, where's the clock state used? It's used here, and we load the state into this object. So the simplest fix would be to make sure this is always set to false afterwards. I don't love that. It does feel like this maybe shouldn't be in the clock state, but it is related to how it's tallying. I guess the other option is that we could make it not serializable, so that this parameter doesn't actually get saved and loaded, but everything else does. What does open do? Is that going to have a similar problem? This is a unused variable? That seems incorrect. No, it is a variable that is only used externally for tracking the opening animation. This is a bit of a hack, but I see what I've done. Okay. This one probably should also be non-serialized. What about max time remaining? What is this value? This is probably the total amount of time we get per run. Yeah, that should be serialized out. This is only used inside the clock state and is used to keep track of the tally system, so this should also not be something that is serialized. UI time remaining. Probably should be saved. This whole system is a little odd, and I feel like this whole logic section maybe shouldn't be part of the clock state is what I'm starting to feel. But let's see if just setting these things to non-serialized will fix the problem. The issue is that we've saved out the clock state, so when we load up this save, I'm not sure how it's going to interact with these things now being non-serializable, but I guess there's only one way to find out. Let us advance and restart. And gonna load up the save again. Let's see what happens here. We have an error. This is to do with the font asset editor. I'm not sure why that's broken right now. Oh, that does look like it worked. I'm not sure why we didn't hit the second breakpoint internally. Why are we not hitting this one? Odd. Regardless, it is set tallying to false. So by making those variables non-serializable and not having them actually be saved out, that has fixed that system. Again, it's probably likely that the state shouldn't actually be in charge of managing that information. It should really only be in charge of tracking your current time, so that that is the only thing that's in that class. But I'm going to move forward for now and not worry about that, because I'm not sure where I would extract that data out to. So we're going to just say that that bug is complete for the time being. Next, I want to see about this death sequence. I want to maybe figure out, is there a way to stop the player from performing actions when they are in the death sequence. So at this point we have a few seconds left. We're going to get rid of, honestly, all the breakpoints that we have besides... No besides. Just going to get rid of all the breakpoints and start fresh. Let's zoom in here too. No reason not to. And then as soon as we go to death... the enemy died. And because the enemy was dead, we were unable to perform an action. So the reason I haven't noticed this before is you have to specifically have a valid target in order to perform an attack. And I'm going to guess that the performing of the attack changes your animation, And because it doesn't see the completion of the death animation, it fails to continue the death sequence. So if I just debug skip forward in time a little bit till we would run out, yeah, then I can perform the attack and the game breaks. So we need to figure out, why are we allowed to do that? I would have thought I would have put something into the ability select screen to prevent you from attacking. Unlockable characters with the hydration, appreciate it. Okay, let's see if we can track down the ability select screen, which is going to be in here. Ability select screen. Yeah, nothing in here actually says nothing in here is checking to see if the unit is dead. We do have a can perform, which does get sent out, but is only being checked by the cost related functions. Perhaps a easy solution would be to add this same logic to the knocked out status effect, because it does have an on enable. That is adding some other listeners. And we can add a ability class.onPerform. This is a public const, so this should be findable. Ability does not contain this. It very much does. Oh, the parameter is can perform. Oh, I see. This part here was fine. Okay. I need to make a on can perform function is the part that I was missing. In here, we should be able to steal this as a reference. And we will add a function somewhere in this section. Seems fine. And I think we don't even need to check anything. We're simply going to get the arguments, convert them to a base exception, and then flip the toggle to say that no, you can't. If this has a knocked out status effect on it, it should just make sure that the perform check is always going to return false, because you're not allowed to perform anything if you're knocked out. Now, this owner value, this is also correct, it looks like. Yeah, on awaken, this gets set to the current unit, and that should all be working correctly for our notification system as well. So that might be enough to stop you from performing the action. That being said, there is a little bit more to this, because if you are already performing an action, I think technically that could still trigger. So you may not be able to trigger a new animation, but I'm not seeing anything preventing a current plan from being executed. So we probably also want to go into the state machine and have some sort of logic in there as well to prevent the game from advancing. Oh, it did not work. Okay, so I was ready to move on to other potential bugs, but we have not fixed this one yet. Why was I still able to perform? Oh, because I'm not even knocked out. Technically speaking, I have not been added, the knocked out status effect has not been added to my character. I am simply out of time. Right. I'm going to take a quick look at the out of time cutscene. This simply adjusts the fog, triggers an animation on the player. Well, it triggers the dizzy animation, then triggers the death animation, and then transitions. And we are waiting for the dizzy animation to complete before playing the death, and I think this is where we're seeing an issue, because if you start attacking, you're going to break this. But again, you shouldn't be able to do any actions while this is being performed. So at a fundamental level, I feel like I shouldn't be able to do anything while a cutscene is being performed. Maybe that's the check we need to be doing. It's not even necessarily caring about whether or not the character is knocked out or whether or not we're out of time. This feels like a bug in that you can perform an action while a cutscene is playing. And I feel like cutscenes should prevent the player from taking any actions. And I suppose I hadn't really thought about that. So in here, when we trigger a cutscene, what exactly happens? We get the cutscene based off of the trigger parameter. We get the associated cutscene out of all possible cutscenes that can happen from that trigger. Then we load the cutscene via its addressable ID, which is going to be essentially the sequence object, the scriptable object which contains the sequence for that cutscene. And then this is just a lambda, so once that addressable is finished loading, it's going to add that cutscene to the response manager with that cutscene's response type. Okay. This has the metadata of end of turn, so when the turn ends, it will try and perform this sequence. This is where we get any sequences. End of turn is happening inside of this end of turn responses. So when we get to the end of turn response combat state, it should be finding the out of time cutscene loaded up in here. And we only set ourselves back to our original state. If we're not transitioning. Interesting. We should be setting up a transition. So even if you were to queue up an action, none of this stuff should be happening. Okay, first let's double check to make sure, are we even getting into this state? Where does this happen? If we have a queued up end of turn response, then we change to this. There's a good chance this system is just broken as we've been prototyping the CT system. And this is just not happening. Okay. We're going to add a breakpoint here. And we're going to retest and see if we even hit the change of state. Because we might be queuing up the cutscene and even starting the cutscene. But maybe we're not entering into that state. No, that can't work. Because we're seeing it, we're physically seeing it start. So that means that we must have entered it. Okay. We're going to have the enemy come towards us. We're going to wait until the last possible second. And then we're going to perform our action. Okay, here we are getting into this because we are seeing a end of turn response. We are changing states. We are getting in here and we are going to get the cutscene that we've queued up. We're going to get the responses. There is only one currently, which is containing 9 steps, which is adjusting the fog and stuff. This is the death sequence. So this is being set up. And then this sequence step that is going to eventually trigger us to go back to our normal state is happening at the very end. That's going to kick off that sequence. Oh, interesting. Is this problem unrelated to hitting an action? Is it just broken in general? Because I didn't even get a chance to queue up an attack there, and it looks like the game still did break. No, that can't be right either. The mystery continues. Let's try this again. All right, so we're going to come up here. Let's remove that breakpoint for now. We'll get rid of that one. And we will get rid of this one. And I just want to see if I don't hit any actions, do we start to see the clouds come in? Just going to advance time. Still seeing an issue. This one didn't even cause the fog to go up. I don't think it's related to this. This is to do with something to do with the TextMesh Pro font creator, which Drixie and I were building some new fonts recently, but that should be unrelated. What? What is happening? Because if we come up here, just wait time. Don't do anything else, just wait. Okay, that was starting to transition, so that time it did work. So why does it work sometimes and not other times? That's going to make debugging this more tricky for sure, because we're not going to be guaranteed to see the problem unless we can make sure that we're in the bad state. So we need to understand why it breaks. It has to do with combat though, because I've definitely seen it work fine outside of combat situations. Okay, the enemy's not attacking the next turn. Yeah, this one didn't even raise the fog. Or tint it. So we didn't even see any of these steps, and it broke. Do we have any information about, like, debug logs? The last thing we saw was animation 2 reverse. This is to do with some of our animating systems. Right, this is the clock closing. So this is setting up the actual clock on the UI to close, which is fine and works. And we can see that we saw the out of time message come through. Which should be queuing up this cutscene. Interesting. But it did not perform it at all. Can I attack right now? I can attack. And once I attacked, it actually started up this sequence. Interesting. But once again, we failed. Got it. This is waiting for Dizzy to complete. But as part of the slash animation system in here, we added this logic where we have an initial ability, which is going to play the slash animation, then wait for the pause frame, and then set the animation speed of the attacker, which in this case is going to be our main character, to a speed of 0. Then, when they are midway through this attack, we get the death animation. Normally, if they were to finish this attack, they would hit this section here, which would set their animation speed to 1, and then play out essentially the rest of the attack swing, and we'd see it hit the enemy and do damage, etc., etc. But in between this initial ability being set up and this damage effect moment, which is when the bar fills all the way and the attack is fully charged and we actually perform it, we're hitting the death. But the player's animation speed is still set to 0. And so it's triggering the Dizzy animation, but because the player still has an animation speed of 0, it's not actually being played. Now, I don't like this, but I think the easiest solution is going to simply be to add a new sequence step into this, which will be animation, set animation speed, we're going to set the player's animation speed to 1. So if the player was in a different animation where their animation was paused, aka set to 0, we're going to make sure that as we trigger this out of time, it's going to set the player's speed to 1. I think there's a couple of bugs here, so I'm going to keep hammering on this, but this is definitely part of the issue, and we're going to need to do this on the player death as well. Ooh, interesting. The player death doesn't actually trigger the dizzy. This just triggers the fog. Does that mean the knocked out status effect is doing that? Yes. And we've already run into this problem before with the knocked out, which is already handling it. Okay. It was only on out of time if you're performing an attack that this can happen. Crazy. All right. Well, that's I think the fix. Took a little while to try and figure out what was happening, but I still want to dig a little bit more because I feel like there might be more problems. Specifically with other actions changing our animation if they continue to be performed. But I guess looking at the way the state machine handles it, it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, that looks like it does fix it. And because the state machine system won't go back to the combined turn where we can take actions, we won't actually normally trigger anything. So it felt like the bug was I was performing an action as we ran out of time, but the issue was more if we were already performing an action as we run out of time. Slightly different, but all equally confusing. So I think that is fixed. And the actual bug wasn't can break, it was animation / animation speed set to 0 broke out of time cutscene. That was the actual issue. What else we got here? HP is not properly being remembered after loading a save. This one's going to be tricky, but let's see if we can dig into this. When we load up, we have max health, but I should have a certain amount of damage done to the player by this point. Yeah, so it's loading up at 55. I want to start by looking at, in this current save, what information are we loading in? So we're going to look at the unit persistent data. So this is our starting health. This is the amount of health we should start with. And this is the constructor for this. But it should have some system where we load this information. Let's take a look at where this is used inside of the backend unit manager. This is going to do a load unit state. When we do a load, we're going to load up all of this data. And I'm not seeing anything here where we actually save out the player's stats or load the player's stats. Did we just miss that when we were handling the save stuff? Interesting. We will re-trigger every single node in the node trees if they were unlocked to be unlocked again. So if you had any stat increases, we would remember that through this system. But we do not remember your current HP. Yeah, and this is the only data we remember. Interesting. So I do think we need a integer for current HP, and we need an integer for current MP. Wrong spot. We need this up here. It's the unit state that we're loading. And the unit state has a series of ability spec states. That's fine, but at the top level, we want to save this information. So then, inside of our save load system, and when we get our current unit state, we're going to want to set the current HP to be equal to the stats mstats. How do we reference that internally? Do we ever reference it internally? Yeah, it looks like we do mstats. So we're going to want to get our current HP and our current MP, which is going to be these two values. We may eventually want to save and load our stagger amount, but I think that's less likely. So I think these are the two parameters we want to keep track of. So we're going to set our current HP value to be equal to the stats current HP. And then we're going to want to set our current MP value to be the MP value. So this will save it out. I spelled something wrong. Capital. But this one isn't capital. I'm changing that. Consistency between those would be nice. Now, from here, we need to, on loading of that unit state, check what our current HP value is and make our HP stat equal to it. And the same thing for MP. And that should allow us to actually save and load our HP and MP stats. So we'll start over. We will need to create a new save. So we'll fight some stuff. Well, we should probably just end the run and start a new one. It'll be easier to do that way and to test. So we're going to continue from where we left off. We died as soon as we loaded in. I'm going to guess that's because the values didn't exist before and they got defaulted to 0. So when we loaded in, it thought our previous health was 0. And therefore, we immediately died. Okay, so we have some health loss. We should be able to exit this map. That should have triggered an autosave. Now, if we reload, we should see our health is lower than 56, which I believe is our current max. Continue. I think it was somewhere around 44. Probably should have looked more closely, but I'm honestly just more concerned about seeing it be down a little bit. And it is, and we can also see our MP value is also being tracked correctly as well. Cool, so those pieces of information are now being properly saved and loaded, which wasn't a bug as much as just a missing feature. Okay, now, what do we want to tackle next? I kind of pulled those three off. this feels like it could be related to some of the stuff we've been looking at, or at least in a similar vein. Some of these are more design oriented that I need to think about them a little bit more to figure out how we're going to fix them, as much as just rather than just being a straight like, oh, this is going to be an easy fix. Yeah, like this one's interesting. Attacking enemy out of combat will break the game because they move away before the attack finishes. I'm a little confused on why this is breaking the game, but regardless, I'm not quite sure of the proper fix. I guess we could look into this at least and get a better understanding of what's happening. CT bar stays after death is also kind of interesting. Should be easy to replicate that with our debug run out of time. We just need to perform an attack and then trigger the game to end, and we should be able to replicate that and test it. This is almost more of a feature slash polish, but it does create a number of bugs if you interact in a way that I didn't anticipate. All right, let's start here. Let's look at these two. So I want to start with the CT bar change. Let's see if we can figure this one out. So, the CT charge bar staying after death. So when we die, if we hit slash do an override and then hit death, no, couldn't time it quite right. Maybe we do a bash, which has a longer CT timer. Okay, so we're gonna hit override and debug around the same time. So the charge bar was there, and it remains there. It disappears for a moment, mostly because it's retracking to the character who's now below the world as we're going to slide everything up. And then it remains. So how do we say that this needs to reset slash go away? How does it currently work? Can we look up the CT bar? Is that what it's called? No. What is this thing named? There's a number of CT background objects. There's player CT, that sounds promising. Is this? Yeah, I think the names are all kind of weird because this was a bit of a prototype when I originally built it, and I have not changed it. But I believe this is actually what's showing our CT value. Unlockable characters with the hydration redeem. Again, appreciate. Okay. CT. So this fades. Yeah, this is all handling like the charge bar slowly filling in and like doing it in a faded way. But we need to find this one. Display via non-zero stat. So if our stat value is greater than 1, this should not be hard-coded to max CT. I guess this is currently only used for the CT system, but this should be a separate variable that is also assigned for stat and max stat. So I guess if we modified the stat value to 0 or the max CT value to 0, it would cause it to no longer be displayed. What kind of impact would that have? This is currently used on stat counter will change. This may not even be used anymore, but regardless, I think I could do an on enable. Where I just do stats type max CT is equal to 0, so that when you get the knocked out status effect added, we just set their current CT that they're trying to perform to 0. It feels a bit hacky, but I'm curious to see if that just works. It's like both a bit odd, but also kind of makes a ton of sense that, like, if you were performing an action and you're knocked out, you should no longer be trying to perform that action. Like, not only is that potentially going to fix the UI, but it could also help with other problems in the future. It just feels a little arbitrary. It did save, so we are going to have to go back in to the world. Luckily, this is still relatively easy to test. So we'll activate bash, override to perform it, and then run out of time. We are knocked out, and it is still showing the bar. And I'm going to guess that that is a problem because we are not actually updating the UI. How often does that UI get updated? Is there anything causing the display via non-zero stack component to update? No. So how does this normally get refreshed? Let's do a little bit of digging. We could have the component subscribe to any stat changes so that it would update regardless. We are hitting it right now. It looks like it is hitting it anytime we move. Because it seems that we refresh the components anytime the player takes an action. But we could do this on knockout as well. I suppose this is a little weird because we're going to be doing this whenever any unit is knocked out, even an enemy. That might be a little odd and cause other bugs. We do have an if statement in there to check to see whether or not it was a hero that was knocked out. And we could add it into that section if we have to, but I want to see what happens if we just make this a baseline part of the knocked out status effect. We're going to get rid of the breakpoints. This feels more wrong. Having the status effect be in charge of refreshing the screen seems off. I think I'd much rather just have the component refresh itself if it sees that the stat it cares about has been modified. I guess it doesn't matter which checkpoint we go to. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to hit override to perform the action and then immediately debug end time. I messed it up. Am I hitting? I'm hitting the wrong button. This should have already have gone away. Interesting. Okay. I'm surprised that did nothing. If anything, I would expect it to do too much. Why was it complaining that it can't reach this checkpoint? Or this breakpoint? The file is saved. Yeah, it is just not reaching those checkpoints at all. Yeah, as soon as I start running it, they are no longer accessible. That is super odd. Nope, not accessible. Can I put breakpoints in other locations? No, I cannot. Okay, that feels like Visual Studio and Unity have kind of just gotten out of sync. So we are going to put this breakpoint here. We're going to hit stop. We're going to close this down and honestly probably close down Unity as well and then reopen everything. When in doubt, turn it off and on again. Oh. It is super upset. Yeah, something is broken. Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna shut all this down. Because it looks like Visual Studio has essentially crashed. And then we're also going to just close Unity and reopen that as well. Just to make sure Unity isn't the problem. Okay, Unity reopened. I will just get Visual Studio and everything open again here, and then we will come back to the normal screen. Just hold with me for a moment as we just get everything reset back up again. Yeah, that's fine. And it looks like we lost track of some of our tabs. Visual Studio did not properly close. I swear I will return in a moment Oh. Yeah, Visual Studio is still busted. I will try closing and reopening one more time. Sorry, bear with me. Wow, this took 2 minutes. That's insane. Okay, that breakpoint is there, attached to Unity. Okay, coming back. So we've reopened Visual Studio in Unity. All we did off camera was just close and reopen everything. But I'm not sure why, but it is still showing this breakpoint as not being able to be hit. So we will just try hitting play and debugging again. We are attached. Can we see any location? So if we go to, I don't know, combat base, this should be getting hit all the time. Yes, okay, so it is hitting this breakpoint. So now if we go forward to the point where we get knocked out, do we hit the breakpoint that's actually there? We do not. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is a classic one we haven't seen in a while. I am in the wrong version of knocked out status effect. We are looking at the old... Oh no, there is only one. No, this is part of core. There is only one. Okay, I thought it was maybe that this was... Sometimes we have duplicated classes between the two game projects we have in our Unity, but this is not that. This is part of core. This knocked out status effect is just not able to get a breakpoint anywhere within it. For some reason, Visual Studio and Unity have gotten disconnected in some way where it cannot find for the metadata. I don't know what it's called, but it's not able to see this part of the code. Unity is seeing the code changes we're making here. We just can't debug here? I mean, the only thing I can think is to see whether or not we're hitting the refresh call, which is going to be tricky. We're going to have to turn that off for now and then go into the world and then put that breakpoint in right before we execute our attack. This might still break in a lot of ways, I'm going to guess. Yeah, I can't quite trigger the next part because it's going to refresh the screen and then I'm not going to have time to actually hit the debug to end the run. I need to be able to place a breakpoint here, and it's just not letting me. And it shows fine here, but is when I attach to Unity, it breaks. Okay, let's try a different way of attaching. Oh, it is broken again. I tried hitting stop, and now we are getting this continuous... Yeah, there's a fundamental issue. Okay. Something's wrong with the tools themselves. I've never seen that pop up before. It did eventually stop on its own. Let's try... Oh, I don't see a way of doing it. I do not see a reattach to Unity process. Maybe this is because I'm using Visual Studio 2022. 2019 had a different way of attaching that used to let me... do this in a slightly different way. Oh! My breakpoints are showing up correctly? Oh, no, they're not. They look like they were. This one still works. And we can still hit this. Yeah, there's some fundamental problem with debugging. Okay, closing and reopening didn't fix it. This is my favorite. My favorite is when we're no longer even trying to fix the bug anymore. We're just trying to fix the setup with Unity and Visual Studio to be able to try and fix the bug. Nope, still broken. Okay, well, how are we on time? We're only an hour in. I want to go for at least another 50 minutes, I would think. So how do we work around the debugger kind of just being busted in this situation? Well... like, this kind of defeats, like, I'm not even 100% sure that Visual Studio is making this code change in a way that we can see. I suppose one thing we could do is add a log in here and see, is this being displayed? Probably should have just done a code word or something, but I'm curious to see if Visual Studio is even pushing the changes correctly. So I want to see if that log is actually going to appear. So if we just end the run. Yeah. it is not even modifying the file anymore. Like, it looks like it's being modified. It feels like it's being modified. It's in the right folder structure. But nothing I'm doing is actually being changed and updated. Alright, let's make sure that it's not somewhere else. Test 1, 2, 3. We're going to change this to a debug log error so it really shows up. And I should be able to see that information being modified here. And I do. Oh my god, I've made the same mistake. We're not adding a knocked out status effect, we're running out of time. I can't believe I've done that mistake twice today. Why? Okay, it's fine. We are not knocking our character out when we hit that debug. We are technically running out of time, which means none of this code is going to be executed. I'm still confused on why it's not showing me that I can debug. Like, why it's saying that this breakpoint cannot be reached. That's still confusing. Fine, sure. But now, at least I understand why it's not hitting the debug.logs. So it's not that there's a fundamental problem with the script. I mean, it could still be, but the actual issue I'm seeing is that I'm debugging ending the run by being out of time. Not by being knocked out. And so none of this code is going to be hit because we're not adding the status effect to the player. I mean, maybe there's a world in which when we run out of time, we should just add the status effect to the player, but I don't think that's what I want to be doing. So when we run out of time, we just trigger this cutscene. Do we do anything else with the player's information? Like, do we modify the player in any way? We call end run. What does end run do? Run complete notification is sent, and we modify our HP to max HP, I guess. Could we just do max CT is equal to 0 here? And then after all of this logic, we could do the refresh screen call. This one. Because this gets called whether we run out of time or when there's a death notification. So maybe this is a better place to put it anyways, because it's not inside the status effect. And this is more central to our like back-end pipeline. Yeah, this is probably the better spot regardless. I spent way too long on that. All right. Embarrassment aside, let's see if this works. So we're going to hit bash and we're going to end the run. Oh, I can do that in the other order. I can trigger the debug to end a run, but it won't actually do it until I take an action. Interesting. Because I hit U first there, or the debug key for ending a run is U currently, but I hit that debug key before hitting the ability and it still worked. Actually, because I hit it in the wrong order, there's a chance that was not a proper demonstration or a proper test. Yeah, so if we come here, we hit this button. Interesting. The fog is still moving, right? Yeah, we're... Okay, so that broke it. So if I end the run mid-attack, now the game just breaks instead of having the UI show when it's not supposed to? I guess that makes sense. So what's happening is we're ending the run, and that's clearing our current action. So I don't think this is a bug as much as it is an issue with trying to test this with debugging. Oh, it's really hard to tell. Okay, what does my debug do currently? Could I find a way to make this debug call less of a problem? Skip clock. This is calling end run. So we're setting the max CT to 0, which causes the UI to disappear, but it also causes the current action to have no valid CT mount. And we're saying that the run is over, but you need to actually perform one more tick for the cutscene to trigger. But the action's already been performed. Yeah, now we're running into a problem where my debug command is built in such a way that it makes it kind of break this, but I think if we were to naturally test this, it would actually work. If we were to have like only one physical time left and let things play out normally, I think it would function. Yeah, if I give it a CT of 1, technically that works, but that only works in this debug scenario. Yeah, and the UI is no longer showing. I think that with a CT of 1 here, it would break and still show the UI in a normal scenario. Okay, so when debugging, we want to have it have a slightly different value. By default, we want to reset CT to 0. But if we are doing a debug run, aka skip clock, we want it to be a value of 1. And the run will end on the next action. Okay. In theory, that should work. So if we were to end a run normally, it will set the CT to 0, but if we're debug ending the run, it'll set it to 1. Okay, run still ends normally, even if we're not in the middle of performing an action. I just wanted to test that. So we have not broken the normal debug logic. But if we come in here and we override an end to run, it does remove the UI. Okay. Now the trickier thing is going to be testing a natural end run, which I think we can do because I made a backup of the save that we were using at the very start of the stream. So this has us running out of time in a few moments, and we can test... Oh no, because we fixed the bug with the health. And so our health is being set to a value that... Okay, so we can't use that first save. Our health value was not being saved before, we fixed that bug, and now that save is essentially invalid. So if I want to test a natural end of a run, I'm gonna need to do it by wasting a ton of time. I guess I can test it via death more easily, so if we let this enemy hit us a bunch, it will eventually get us close to death. Okay, not enough. I don't think this will kill us either. Nope, down to 2. We're going to wait until it moves, and then when it's about to range attack us, we perform an attack. We see some errors, and those errors are to do with attack patterns because the enemy has no one valid to attack when the player is dead. But the CT bar did properly disappear. Now, the other one is going to be trickier because we're going to need to actually waste enough time. So we're gonna have to walk back and forth in a circle for a little bit. Just gonna do little circles. Realistically, we should have some sort of debug command to reduce the clock by set amounts. Yeah, we should probably just do that. That'll be faster in the long run and more helpful. So let's make a new debug command. Let's assign this one to like... We have an advanced clock. I don't know. K? Instead of skip clock, which is immediately ending the run, could we advance the clock to a specific value? It's for the calendar system. Let's make this so it's an amount of 1. and we will minus equal by the amount instead of just negative negative. Which I don't remember what that's actually called right now. Okay, so then that should allow us to be able to control the time. So we can make a new advanced time function. Advanced time by, and then we'll have an amount, and that will come into here. I think in this situation, because this is going to be a debug function, we don't care about the flag. And then that should be all we need to do. We don't need that. Okay. In here, now we want to advance time. This value is going to need to be variable. I guess we can just hit it multiple times. So let's just do 30, and each time we hit it, we'll advance the clock by 30 seconds instead of 1. That should speed things up significantly. That should all work. Okay, let's give that a shot. Okay, so now if we hit K, we advance the clock by 30-second chunks. So if I keep hitting K, it's hard to tell where we are because it updates over time. But this is still faster than walking in circles. So 2 more times, I think. Okay, and then I'm gonna change rooms because that'll trigger an autosave. And then if we perform a bash, yeah, it properly, whoa, not proper. It breaks in the same way we were seeing it break in the debug situation. Interesting. So when we end a run through death, we want to let CT be 0. But if we're ending a run through skipping the clock or through advancing time normally, we want that value to be 1 so that it still finishes its current action. There feels like there's a separate, deeper bug here. Because before we make this change, I want to see what happens if we run out of time while walking. Like, if we're not doing this whole, like, CT counting up system, but if we just move 1 step at a time, which only eats 1 moment of time, do we end the run at 0, or do we end the run at -1? Yeah, you need to step 1 more time for the run to actually end. It closes it, but it won't actually end the run the moment the clock closes. It ends the run the moment you take your next action. That seems wrong. I think it should be checking for this potentially more immediately. If we're out of time, it should trigger the end of turn cut, or the out of time cutscene immediately. Because this is checking to make sure the player's turn is complete. I guess we could take a deeper look at what's going on here inside of this function. Okay, yeah, so we're calling this every frame. But I'm going to guess we're not getting into there. We are not. We're not getting into any of these functions. So what does this mean? Has units. It does have a unit. Current unit is turn complete. End turn is false. Okay, so then this is only going to do end turn when the player actually takes an action. So we only get into this is turn complete on the moment that the player ends their turn. Trixie with the hydration redeem, appreciate it. So we only call this section when a player has finished their turn. So should we not be seeing this called the moment we run out of time? Like, we are out of time at this point, but we never hit this section. I guess that implies do we not call end turn on moves? That seems odd as well. Okay, so we're going to take a step forward. Clock is saying one. We did not hit the end turn call. Interesting. So we don't get into here on moves. This is closing. So why do we get this call here at this moment? Because we have an end of turn response. Oh, I made a change recently in order to get the MP system up and running, and I ported everything over to use this AT, this actions stat, instead of using MP for our action stats. Yeah, this is a bug that I introduced the other day. I don't know what other implications this may have. Yeah, have not tested with the axe stat. Okay, so I think the fundamental problem we are seeing is because of that. So we were trying to fix the CT bar appearing after the player has died, but we were seeing that the player wouldn't die on taking their final step immediately. They needed to take one additional step, and that was because of a change I made to stop using MP, but instead made this new stat called actions, and that was causing a bunch of problems. So now every time we step, we are ending the turn. So if we get rid of all this debugging, still broken. Still requires one additional step. Okay. Well, we at least hit this part, so that's a step in the right direction. Realistically, I could just get rid of the dead code as well. Like, actions remaining is basically always going to be true. Currently, you only get one action per turn. It's kind of hard-coded to be that way. We never really increment or decrease that stat anymore since we've moved to the CT system. Let's look at the out of time system. Out of time. In here, when we run out of time, here, we're going to call this logic. Where'd Unity go? So if I take another step, yeah, we don't clock advance until after. Where is this happening from? Here. What is this is called here at the end of the turn. Okay, so this code has become very complicated and really doesn't need to be as much. We had this concept of is turn complete that we used to use because the player used to have multiple actions. The player could do multiple things and they could do a couple of different actions in a row. And only once they had ended their turn and they were done performing all their actions, will we then say, okay, now the turn is ended, let's perform some end of turn logic. But realistically, now every action... no one takes multi-turn actions anymore. Everything is just happening one time unit at a time. And once that time unit is done and we've advanced time, that should be the moment when the turn is over and we should be checking for end of turn stuff. What else does advanced time do? Just refreshes the screen. What if we just change the order? What if we advance time first, then we call complete? I think there's a much greater refactor that is deserved here, especially as we've, like I said, moved away from some old tech and we're no longer doing the multi-action system. And like we might want to bring it back is like the thing that's keeping me from just ripping all the dead code out and rewriting the whole thing. But if I want to bring it back, maybe I should just bring it back at that time. Like, let's remove the dead code. And if we want to build it, probably should just build it from scratch in the future. I think this should fix it. I just don't know what other implications swapping these two things should have. No, it still doesn't fix it. Fantastic. Okay. First step we don't care about. We're going to hit a bunch of breakpoints. We don't care about those. Okay. Advancing time, ending turn, all good. We take another step. We say that we're going to advance time. We're going to end up ending the run. So ending the run is going to refresh the screen, do a bunch of other stuff. Say that the run is complete. And we're also going to trigger this out of time cutscene to be queued up. Now here we're going to say the run is ended. And then after that, we're going to check to see if we have any end of run responses, which is going to be our cutscene. And this is saying we don't. But we should have just added one. The load takes a second. This is asynchronous. In the time it takes for the cutscene to load, we've already checked whether or not we have any cutscenes we want to play at the end of the turn. Oh, that's brutal. And then we're not going to trigger this anymore because we've already said that the turn is over and now we expect that you're waiting for the next turn. That is brutal. Okay. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to... No, that doesn't work. My thought is maybe this should just be out here. Like, if at any point we have end of turn responses, trigger them. I mean, we can try it. My concern with this setup is that I feel like the end of turn responses should be at the end of the turn. But realistically, if at any point we have one queued up, this will probably fix it so that the moment that the addressable actually gets added, it will trigger this. But it just feels wrong. Because it's not doing what it says it's doing anymore. It used to be that it would trigger at the end of a turn, but now it's just going to trigger immediately. And that also looked like it broke a bunch of stuff, which is what I was figuring. Let's turn off the debugger. Yeah, it definitely busted a bunch of things. Oh, we lost that save because we actually did transition. Okay, so we need to leave here. And then lower our time down a little bit. And we're going to have to wait for this to finish filling all the way down to see what I emptied it to. I hit the debug button a few times, so hopefully I didn't overshoot. Okay, let's do one more. And then we're just going to reduce time a little bit further, get down to maybe 3 again if we can. 2. I'm also going to permanently save this. Oh, I did not mean to make a... I meant to go down a file, but okay, I guess we have a 4th save file. And I'm going to make sure that works. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so we come in here with 2 seconds on the clock. Yeah, it completely broke the cloud transition system by moving that outside of the normal location. So we can't do that. This is like a fundamental core problem. And again, this is because it takes a moment for our cutscene to load via the addressable system. And by the time this cutscene is loaded, we've already checked whether or not we have anything waiting that we need to respond to. And we didn't find anything. And then the cutscene loads and adds itself. There's a couple of different ways that I could fix this. I'm just debating which way I want to go. You know what? We are at just about at time, and I feel like I'm flailing a little bit here on stream, so I think I do want to take that break. Oh, we're not taking a break today. We are just doing one stream. Yeah, it's anticlimactic, but I think I want to fix this off camera. So basically, I'm going to find a way to tell whether or not... I'm going to figure out a way to tell whether or not we have a sequence queued up, or whether or not the cutscene system is got something loaded, because we should have this load count we can check. So is loading... So we could try doing something like this. I don't think this is going to work, but we could do cutscene manager.instance is loading complete. No, that doesn't work either. Because this will be true almost all the time. Yeah, so I'm going to have to find a way to make it so that we can trigger the end of turn responses at the right time once the cutscene is actually loaded. And that's going to be a little tricky to do, but I'm going to dig into it and I'm going to try and find a fix for that. I do think that we have fixed the initial bug of the CT bar staying after death and loading into the Goddess Realm. I think that is actually resolved. It just has also found us a new bug, which is the fact that we are not properly running out of time on the turn that you run out of time, and you need to take an extra step. And that's the fundamental problem that's still causing us issues. I don't believe, based off what I'm seeing, that we have to have a amount in here greater than 0. This should just be able to be 0 and still work. And the only reason that we need the greater than 0 currently for the advancing by clock ones is simply because of this bug. That we are not tracking the cutscene at the right time. Okay. Now, that all being said, we're going to leave this last bug for me to deal with. Leave this last bug for me to deal with off camera. I am going to just write it down so I don't lose it. End of turn responses are not catching the out of time cutscene. It's not loaded in time, loaded fast enough, causes the player to get one extra turn after the watch has closed, and breaking. That's fine. This is fine. This tells me what the issue is. And I will fix this camera later, or fix this issue later. I'm going to leave it as massive text because it's something I want to do probably within the next 24 hours. Cool. So, leaving that alone, I will find a fix for that. Tomorrow, I will be back. I was talking about this a little bit at the beginning of the stream, but I have 4 weeks off I have 4 weeks off. I will be off until January 29th. So starting tomorrow, I will be streaming 4 to 5 times a week, kind of just covering as much of this process as possible. Today, we are kind of just cleaning things up and fixing some bugs, but tomorrow I'm going to be trying to work towards getting a demo that I can have on Steam, a private demo that I can send codes out in like Discord or wherever and have people be able to play the game and give thoughts on it. But I need to do a fair amount of content creation. We've got to do some dialogue and story pass. I want to do an audio pass, and there's still a fair amount of combat work I want to do. Like we did last year where we did 4 weeks of game dev, I'm going to stream a bunch of it, but we may also fail to get the demo. Last year, I thought I was going to be able to get that demo done by the end of that 4-week period, and we did miss that mark. It's also possible we may not be able to accomplish this year, but once again, I'm going to try the best I can and see where the tasks lead me. Maybe we end up building whole features that take a whole week and means that we don't hit this goal, but I'm going to try and do whatever makes the most sense, and I'm very excited to have 4 weeks to work on this project without having to context switch to real work or anything, just really focus on this. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. When exactly, I'm not entirely sure. Discord will be the best spot, and I will update the Twitch schedule as I get a better understanding of times when I will be streaming. But mainly, the thing to note is I will be streaming a bunch more, and that's pretty much it. So I will see folks tomorrow and through the rest of the week and the next 4 weeks. For the time being, though, this will be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.